Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and we're doing our Tuesday morning Stroke Buddies Stroke Survivor Support Group meeting. Well, I always feel good when I get that out. And today, back for the third time, we have Julie Schwertfeger, and she's done two other presentations for us that we really enjoyed, and I asked her today to come back and talk. Well, she mentioned when we were talking about the wellness one that she knew something about balance, and I said, well, balance is just huge for lots of stroke survivors. So if I'm not wearing out my welcome, can we get you to come back a third time? So I begged, and here we are. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Julie at this point. And thank you so much, Julie, for being willing to do this and share your knowledge with all of us and all the people that do watch it on YouTube.
Thank you, Ralph. And I have to start by celebrating you on your birthday, doing all of this good, hard work for all of us to live a better life. Thank you so much. And I'm delighted to be with you on your birthday. So my name is Julie Schwertfeger. I'm a physical therapist. I'm an old physical therapist and one that is focused on stroke and brain injury. And for the decades I did that, I started to notice a trend that the best of our assessments and the best of our treatments still really left a lot to be desired to do a good service for people that are living with stroke long-term, both the person that had the stroke and their support system. And so I went on to get my PhD because I'd like to be part of helping develop better ways of assessing and treatments and things to make life as good as possible after someone has had a stroke. So that's a little bit of my background, and stroke touched my life personally early on with my maternal and paternal grandparents, and those experiences definitely fueled the direction I took in my career. So with that, enough about me. Let's talk about balance. Balance is so important, and as we get older, the things that can add to our challenges with balance sometimes go up precipitously. But even people that are young have falls and have decreased balance. And certainly after you have a stroke, some of the changes from your stroke further precipitate things that you can be aware of, and a lot of which you can take steps to improve because they work against your balance too sometimes. So the crux of this talk is going to be based on the Centers for Disease Control materials, which were developed with our tax dollars. Are you guys seeing something that says My Mobility Plan? Yeah, okay, good. And so I like to use our tax dollars wisely. These are really bright people that created the material. It's freely available because we all paid for it with our taxes. And so your healthcare providers, people in your community, and certainly you all have access to this. So I want to bring it to your attention if you don't know about it, and also to hear from you if you're using this or other things to share with the group. But so just to start with, let's see, I have two screens and they seem to work against me. Can you still see my mobility plan? You do, good, okay. So my mobility plan is one of the flyers that I sent ahead to Ralph. And so you guys should have this and a handful of others that I'll go through. And it's just looking at things to help you stay independent. Now you'll see this is very generic. This is for anybody, but certainly as we age. And I would just add an exclamation point on that. If you're living with the effects of stroke, the age, in addition to the age, you've got the effects of stroke that make your mobility and your balance a priority to look at. So you identify what things work against it and then how you can improve it. So what do you do to stay independent? Is this just a little one pager? And so looking at, talking about it, looking at yourself, your home and your neighborhood, all of the things that matter to you and the places that you move around in to live a good life is what these plans look at. And so this lets you look at and keep track of some of the things, your eyes. If we don't see well, that is certainly something that's one of the primary systems that we use for our balance. Also, just having a good physician who looks at your balance and who you feel comfortable talking to about things that you're concerned about, so that that checkup is a valuable checkup to you, not just one that somebody crosses off the list if they did the checkup, but they're answering your questions and looking at the things you know need to be looked at. Another big one on this checklist is the reviewing of medications, and we'll talk a little bit about.
I think the visual went away.
Oh, it did. Okay. Is that
I thought
back?
it was, okay, thanks
no.
for interrupt for, I thought she hadn't done the, okay.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it's my two screens. So if I look like I'm looking slightly to the side, it's because the screen that has my visual is not the one that the camera is. Let me see if I can put them at least closer. Okay. So here's the checklist. So we've got your checkup, again, making sure it's a physician you feel like you can talk to and who looks at the things that matter and might be working against your balance or other things. Your eye exam, making sure you have those scheduled and that you have a good relationship with your eye doctor so they're answering your questions about your vision. It's very important for balance. Another area very important for balance is medications. A lot of medications have side effects individually and or in combination. Sometimes those side effects go up, and some of those side effects are things that decrease your balance or increase your risk of falls. So knowing what those are and having those conversations with both your physician and your pharmacist, who tends to be sometimes the most qualified person to understand all of the drug and drug interaction effects, because maybe there's things they can change or reduce in your medications, which is always a good thing to make you feel more steady. And then that regular activity. We have bodies and brains because we need to move, and moving should feel good. So finding things that get you to do the things that matter to you in your life and staying strong and keeping moving is really important. And so you see a little beginning of an exercise both for strength and balance activity chart that some people find helpful. And then your home. So staying safe in your home. So this could be yourself, your home, and your community. So we did self, looking at your checkups and your moving around and your exercise in your eyes. Now we're looking at your home, and it gives you a nice checklist, again, that you can just read through, and you can choose to actually check it off or just look at it as a really nice reference, like a bulleted list. But if you've got stuff that you put on the floor, I'm always guilty of this, but taking a moment to appreciate that, and then I'm more likely to clear this stuff up off the floor. If rugs are throw rugs, and they can be taped down, or if I could get something that's sturdier so it doesn't shift when I step on it, that's also something that decreases falls. Coils and wires and things that we string across the floor is another one. Is there a way we can route those or get additional outlets or ways of doing that so we're not having another trip hazard? Our kitchen, items that are used all the time, are they in easy reach so I'm not stepping on things or really reaching out of my base of support unnecessarily when I'm just thinking about making dinner? And then also have the step stool, have something that's really sturdy and safe for the things that you do need to store higher. And then there's our bedrooms. Do I have enough light? Is it a bright enough light so I can see, especially if I'm getting to bed later at night and it's dark, or if I get up in the middle of the night, or going down the stairs is another important area. Are the lamps close to the bed where I can turn them on or off, or do I have a clapper or something like that where I don't have to stumble potentially out of bed, and people can fall out of bed. And then also night lights can be very helpful. Again, to give that little extra light if you do get up in the middle of the night, or forget to take your slippers off, those little things. The next would be our stairs. Again, making sure that they're even and that I've got handrails if I need those. If the carpet is shifting, that's certainly a fall risk. Loose or broken handrails, to make sure I get somebody to come in and repair those. Making handrails on both sides to give me even more support might be something to consider. The brightness of the light, making sure it's not too bright or glaring, but also that there's enough light. And then having a light switch where I need it, right? If the light is lovely and bright, but I have to get to the other end of the stairs to turn it on, it really didn't do what I needed it to. So getting an outlet or a switch installed on the other end of the stairwell is a good thing to do. And then bathrooms. Bathrooms are one of the areas I say you can't focus too much when you think about how to make your bathroom safe. It's all hard surfaces. There's water both coming at us and coming out of us. And we're going in there when we have to use the washroom, which already can change your blood pressure, right? And a lot of times we might have some urgency. So you want to make sure you're not trying to be a hero in the bathroom, like be as safe as possible, both in the shower, at the sink, and on the toilet. Any non-slip rubber, if there's a place to put that, is a helpful thing. Grab bars are very helpful if you need a raised toilet seat or things like that. And also just the ability to move around. If you use a cane or a walker, is there enough space for that? And if not, can somebody come in and give you some suggestions on how to coordinate yourself in there so you do feel good in the bathroom about why you need to be there and not put yourself at risk or feel unsafe. And then our community is the last piece of this little trifold. So how do I stay safe in my community? This goes through everything from finding ride shares if you're not driving on your own, or even if you are driving, but sometimes you don't feel up to it. Having those options and knowing what they are so they're readily available, maybe even posted on your refrigerator or somewhere prominent so they're there when you need them. A refresher course would be another. And that is one of the CDC items that I wanted to start with because it's a nice basic primer. And then what I want to do is now I'll go through what I prepared for us for today. But as I do that, I don't want to just be a lecturer. I'm here for you, and I value your feedback and your experience. So if you have thoughts about that first.
Yes, I do. I do have a question.
Yes.
If you live alone, what are you supposed to do in getting around in your apartment or house?
If you live alone, what are you supposed to do about getting around your apartment or house? I'm not sure I understand the direction of your question. Is
like in the nighttime when you have to get up to use the bathroom or something or get a drink of water?
Very good. So is this Winnie?
Yes.
You are so smart. So Winnie, I'm learning, because I came a couple times before, is quite a planner and very organized and very inquisitive. So Winnie, with some of your strengths that I already know, just from the little bit I've gotten to interact with you, planning ahead and knowing what you tend to need are the biggest powerful tools that you can use as your superpowers to be safe and not and reduce risk of falls. So when I say that, I'm going to go through the list that you put in your example for your question. If you need to get up in the middle of the night because you're parched or you have a cough and you need a sip of water, you might say, you know what, this is the time of year that happens. What can I do? Before I go to bed, let's see, do I have a humidifier that I put on that reduces that, where I maybe don't have to get up and get a drink? That might be one thing that I make sure I set up, maybe give myself a little reminder if it's not something I always do, and have that humidifier on, and it might take away that need to get up unnecessarily at night. Another option that people do is, in fact, I can't think of where I've seen this, but you can fill up your basin of water, just a little one, and sometimes they even have the ones where the cap to the bottle is the little cup. And if you have that right next to your bed, if you get parched or have a little scratchy throat at night, you've already got your water that you've laid out by your bed. To be kind to yourself, right? So you don't have to get up after you've put yourself to bed and go running around and your feet are cold on the floor and all of that stuff. So having the water set out already is a nice thing to do. And I'll tell you, my husband has to take thyroid medicine, which you're supposed to take first thing before you take any food or drink or anything. And his physician that took out, because he had his thyroid removed, he actually suggested, and he said, this is what you do. Get the little water container, fill it up before you go to bed, and it has the little cup you can put right on top of it. And when you get up, have your pill right there. So before you ever get out of bed, it's right there. It's the first thing you do, and you don't have to forget, you don't have the chance of forgetting, and you don't have to go zipping off to do it, where you, again, in the morning, we tend to be a little less steady because we're waking up. The other thing would be the night lights. So if you do find that you're getting up at night, having the night lights where they can serve a purpose is also a very helpful thing you could do if you live alone or if you live with somebody. And then the other would be having grab bars and things that, again, knowing that you're half asleep or groggy and the lights are down, having things to grab hold of that are nice and steady and certain would also be good things to do. And lastly, I always think about getting up at night. Well, why do we get up at night? Very often, it's because we went to bed upset, or we ate or drank too close to when we went to bed. So we got to get up to toilet, right? So looking at when you're eating compared to when you're sleeping, and maybe saying, you know what, after 8, I really don't want to be drinking a lot of liquid. So if I get up, if I really want something, I'll have a sip of water, but I'm not going to have the cup of water, and start to train your behavior where you're drinking earlier in the day, and maybe shift that bathrooming time so you do it before you go to bed, and then you get better sleep, which is very powerful and in fact helps your balance as well. So Winnie, that was a really long answer. But did any of that sound helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for asking.
I like the method of getting everything ready that you might expect you would need, because I don't like to see a lot of bright light when I get up, because it tends to work against you going back to sleep. I don't have any real problem sleeping, but I'm always a little hesitant. When I started taking my blood pressure pill at night, I didn't want to take it at 10, so I started taking it the first time I got up, and I would have it all ready and a little cup of water, and you do it with my eyes shut. I put them in a certain place so I could find it by touch if I needed to. And because light's very powerful. On the flip side of that, we had somebody, Declan McIntyre last week, who was talking about sleep and circadian rhythms and stuff. And I've been moving mine by getting up at the time I want to get up. I was shifting to later and later, going to bed and getting up. And I've been shifting mine back by getting up at the time I want and going outside and letting sunlight hit me, because that's a big cue.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
And it actually is working. It doesn't work all in one day, but I've been kind of shifting back.
Oh, wonderful. And what a great example of deciding and planning to change your behavior where it becomes a new pattern, right? It's work. It's work to do these things. It doesn't.
People always
easy to just say them, but it is work to make them happen.
People always thank me for putting these on like I don't learn anything, like I only do it for other people. I learn something. I learn several somethings every week, every Zoom meeting. I learn something about stroke every single day. Anyway.
I love it. I love it. And as do I. I love being part of this.
Well, it's part of being a lifelong learner. If you're a lifelong learner, you're open to, you're looking around for stuff to absorb. But I'll let you get back to your presentation.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ralph. This is wonderful. Okay, so again, here's me and a study we're going to talk a little bit about, but this is, again, our tax dollars at work, and a lot of really bright people and all the scientists and the work that they've published were used to put into this. And so this comes from something called practice guidelines, which when there's a real strong bucket, a lot of evidence that says, yes, this works, or no, this doesn't work, or maybe even this is dangerous, this actually works against a cause, it becomes a clinical practice guideline. And those were what were used along with experts in different fields to come up with these this program. And it's called the STEADI based fall prevention program. And so we're going to talk a little bit about these resources in this program, identify some of the resources, and Ralph has them. If they're not up already, they will be up for you to be able to pull and use and do good stuff with if you'd like. And then let's talk about ways to be more steady. And you are my target audience, so I tailored this just for today. So we're going to highlight the burden of falls in society, that it's a big issue. If you ever feel unsteady, you are in really good company. How do we prevent falls? What are the tools we can use so we can reduce our risk of falls and feel more steady? And then this last one, I don't know that we'll get to, but this would be like in your community, somebody may have developed a program. There are community-based programs that use these tools and similar tools. So my question to all of you, have falls affected you? And that could be almost falling, where you just don't feel so steady and certain about the things you used to do, or did you actually fall but got caught on a couch or something where you didn't hit the ground? Now, you don't have to say it out loud. You're welcome to share if you want, but I just want to take a moment and think about that. When's the last time, or has there been a time when I felt unsteady? And I'll give you my own example just to share back with you, because again, I learned from this stuff too. I don't want to just be a lecturer. I love to hike and I love to be outside. I know Ralph, you and I talked about this. We share that bathing in nature. And it's been icy, right? It got cold. I'm in Chicagoland. So walking in the woods, I could see there was some frost, and I had my nice grippy shoes on, but still it's icy. And I tried to walk on the sides of it and walk a little slower, modify how my walking was. But I hit a patch where it was slick. And though I caught myself, I took a big step to try and catch my balance. I still went down on my one knee, and it hit pretty hard, and I had a pretty good bruise there. So that's how a fall affected me very recently. This was just in the last couple of weeks. And so that affected me. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, go ahead. What?
Oh, I didn't want to step on your words.
Oh, I thought you were in a break. I stepped on you. I was going to say, I find that I've only fallen 3 times in 15 years. I don't know about the first one. The second one was due to lack of visual orientation. Horizontals and verticals become a lot more important to us, I believe. And the third one was from not paying attention. And I find that, you know, I'm like anybody else. I find that, you know, I stumble or don't fall, but have issues fairly regularly. And I can tell you that they're almost always caused by my not paying 100% attention to what I'm doing. I'm going to eventually make a video on things you shouldn't do while you're walking, like check your cell phone, like take something out of your pocket, like put on a shirt or take off a shirt, anything that blocks your visuals.
Yeah.
Any kind of multitasking should not happen while you're walking, in my opinion. I'm 15 years out almost, and I have really pretty good balance for a stroke survivor. But I do all these things because prevention, you know, is really a good thing. The other thing about when you fall, you can get hurt, but the one thing that really affects more, and I think unless you get badly hurt, the thing that really is the biggest issue if you fall is it hurts your confidence badly.
Yes.
If you're especially, you know, if I fell now, it wouldn't do what it, to my confidence, what it would do to somebody who's, say, 1 year out, just starting to lose the cane and walking on their own, they fall. And man, they're going to think they got to go back to the cane and every other thing. So it really, you know, 2 reasons to protect yourself. One would be from the actual physical injury, and the other is from the mental injury, which I think is often greater. And that is the loss of confidence that comes with falling.
That is a brilliant statement, Ralph. I'm gonna grab hold of that and take this slide and just encourage all of us together to look at this. So maybe like Ralph was saying, 3 times in 15 years after a stroke, and I know he challenges his balance and walks out on uneven ground as an exercise. Maybe it's subtler than that, but to get at that psychological aspect, if there's things that you're changing in your life that you find value in, that make you feel free and like you're fully living, and because of your balance, it's more subtle and it's creeping in and it's narrowing your world, that's a great thing to be able to try to reflect on too. So let's say maybe you had a fall and then these bullets read very, very directly. But let's say something more subtle. Let's come at it from a little bit of the side. Maybe is there something that made you stop and change something? Like maybe you used to get down on the floor to get something from under the couch or the bed, and now you don't. You get something that you can tug under there because you're like, I'm not sure I could get down on that floor. I feel unsteady, or I just don't feel like I could get back up. That kind of gets at the same thing, but from a real proactive opportunity to say, well, what is it that makes you not able to get down on the floor? Because if you can work on that, you can get that part of your life and the world that you can inhabit and move around and back. And if there's anything worth fighting for, right, it's our ability to move around and do the things that we want to do in our day without being fettered by things like being uncertain we can do it. Another, and this is also very subtle, I don't know if I have one for the fellas. Let's say if you have a backpack or putting on a brassiere or hinging something around your back, or maybe doing the back of your hair, really doing a proper job with the back of your hair, or washing your back, the middle of your back. If your range of motion is hampered, where you can't get there and do that for yourself, maybe that's something to look at. Maybe there's a way to improve that. Your mobility definitely affects your balance as well. So it's another proactive way you can look at and address. Did I step on somebody's words? Jump in.
Sounds like background noise. Somebody
I'd like to make a couple of comments, if I might.
Please.
I'm Bruce Hetzler.
Hello, Bruce.
Hello. At first, Ralph was talking about multitasking. In general, multitasking is a myth. That is, people really do not multitask well. You want to do something well, you concentrate on that alone and do things sequentially.
Very true. Harvard study.
Well said.
Secondly, early on in your presentation, you talked about vision. It's very important to have good vision and have your eyes checked every year. There are some classic psychology studies that show that vision dominates the other senses. For example, if you are running your hand along a metal pipe that's completely straight, but you're looking at that pipe through prisms that make it look curved, it will feel curved. It will no longer feel straight. So what you see influences what you feel. And if your vision is impaired by a stroke, for example, if you have double vision, as I do, I have prisms ground into my lenses to correct the double vision. So you want to have your eyes tested frequently to make sure you've got good vision.
Well said, Bruce. And sometimes your eye doctor, if you're going to an eye doctor that doesn't get that and doesn't know how to give you prisms and adjust things beyond just your normal eye exam, you might want to reach out. Probably this group already knows some good vision experts that make sure you get the eye doctor you need. All right. So for any medical professional, make sure they're answering your questions. If they can't, there's probably a different person out there that you want to find out through your network and get to the right doctor. Thank you for saying that. I love, yes, vision. Your visual system is so hardwired, and it goes all the way across from the front to the back, and then it spreads out, and there's 3 different sections in the back of your brain that vision very quickly goes into your visual memory. and it fills in for you before you even see a whole image, and it tells you what you saw. Might be wrong, but it's going to tell you based on your experience and the meaning that you're having. And in fact, I love Bruce's experiment. I haven't read that one, but they have, there's a rubber hand experiment that you can Google where I know that it's not my hand. My hand's behind a blind, and they'll take like a phlebotomist or a rubber arm, and they put a sheet on so it looks continuous. And I'm seeing this arm, and they're touching my hand on the other side that I can't see at the same time as this rubber hand. And then they poke a pin in it or something. But people feel like they've poked their hand. They feel the pin, even though it's in this rubber hand and not their own. So like that's how strong our visual systems are. They're incredibly powerful. So yes, just to second Bruce's really good point. Your vision is so important. If there's any questions you have, it's worth taking the time to say, let me get some answers. Let me keep following up on this. And then Ralph, are you going to say something?
Yeah, I was using the term multitask because people are familiar with it. I've watched Brain Games on Nat Geo, and one time they had an episode where they got the world's foremost expert in multitasking, and he couldn't multitask. No one can. But so my point would be, if you can only focus on one thing at a time, focus on your walking. That's particularly true at transitions. Okay, I broke my own rule about a month ago, and I was looking at my phone, and of course I did it right as I was stepping over an area rug. And guess what? I caught my toe. I caught my toe on my good leg. It's not a matter of like a drop foot thing is going to make you fall. It's the lack of attention. So if you can only focus on one thing, focus on your walking and what you're about to walk over. This is particularly true when you're going up a step into like my garage, or coming up 3 steps to my deck and then into my house, things like that, or rugs, any kind of transition, pay strict attention.
And sometimes small loving animals. So with all
Small
the people I've
animals.
treated for falls, yeah, throw rugs, clutter, and animals that love you but seem to try to kill you. You're walking around the house.
I'm getting a rescue kitty today, so I've got one more thing to put on my list to be careful.
Yeah, make sure that you don't need to be rescued from your rescue kitty. And not all of them are like that, but some like to jump around on you while you're walking, which is
No, some will do where they try and polish your legs while you're walking. So I'll try and discourage
free pets. Yeah.
I'll try and discourage that by stopping and petting him and then not allowing it. But anybody, two more things. Anybody who has vision issues after a stroke, I think ought to see a neuro-ophthalmologist, because typically optometrists and even your regular ophthalmologists don't necessarily know much about the whole neuro aspect, the whole stroke aspect of things. And in fact, some neuro-ophthalmologists aren't all that great in my experience, but I'm not here to pick on people. Yeah, and I read somewhere that your brain uses 30% of its energy in processing for vision.
We are visual animals. We really
I think that you and Dr. Hetzler are the scientists, but I believe I read somewhere it's up to 30% of all the energy the brain uses, and the brain processing power goes to vision. It's very important to us.
Wonderful. Oh, okay. So enough about our own reflecting on when we felt.
I have another question.
Oh, yes.
Yesterday I went to my PT, and she told me I was going up the stairs, and she told me look forward and not at the stairs. Is that true?
So she's telling you that because she wants you to look ahead and rely on your other balance systems. But at a certain point, you have to make sure you're safe. Like first thing is always going to be your safety. So if you're holding on to handrails, and especially if your PT's with you and you're trying it out, practicing by looking not at your feet is a good thing to do to enhance your balance. But all things considered, if you're by yourself, no one's around, and you need to be safe, and the safest way that you walk on the stairs, is to look, you go ahead and look, because safety is always first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
good
if there's
question.
no stairs, handrails to hold, and what?
Say that again.
If there's no handrails to hold, what do I do?
Be
stairs
careful
with no
with
handrails.
counts.
I would say put some in.
Immediately, before you go
Right.
up those stairs, put in handrails.
Put some handrails in.
So there's a couple of things. If you have an assistive device to use, even if it's just for those stairs, like sometimes it's a landing with one or two, like a stoop or a double stoop, it might be worth grabbing that cane that you use to get in and out of the house, and then you put it in the car, you keep it right in the hallway as you go out, just to have that. If you can get the handrails put in, I think it's always a good idea, and it'll not just help you, but it'll be nice for other people to keep them from slipping and falling on the stairs. If you live in a climate like mine, it's, between rain and ice and leaves and all of that stuff, there's all kinds of slip hazards. So having a safety rail is just a good idea.
It's a public place. And she made me hold 10 pounds in my hand and go up the stairs.
Oh, PT, pain and torture. That's why they call us that. But so what she's doing is she's building your capacity beyond what you'll need when you're actually just doing it because you got to get in and out of the house or wherever you're going. And so by having extra reserves, even if you're running, you're tired, you're trying to multitask, even though you shouldn't. Building that extra capacity puts you at a better ability to not fall, even if you get a little bit off your balance. So she's challenging you, which is good.
One thing you can do, the answer to that question really depends on where you're at with, in my opinion, and I'm not a PT. It has to do with where you're at in terms of proprioception, because if you don't have a sense of where your feet are, I think you should be looking down. And there are exercises you can do to increase your proprioception. I have one on my YouTube channel, basically something they teach you in physical therapy. They take, like, I'm using a scrap piece of 4x4. They take $150 maple therapy block and put it on the ground, have you stand in the parallel bars. I'm using a frame walker, which I also sandbagged for somebody with ataxia, so they couldn't jerk it around and made it more stable. And you basically put the block there and you practice putting both of your feet, one toe at a time, onto the block, and until you can, while you're looking, until you can put them, like I always put my toes sticking over the exact same amount, both sides. Once you can do that, then what you start doing is trying to do that without looking. And I talk about this, it's called foot placement. It's funny because I mentioned in a Zoom meeting the other day, and Marilyn went and found it and commented on it. And I commented back saying, wow, I can't believe well, she had to be listening and then take the initiative to go find it and comment. But proprioception is an important thing after a stroke, and I think you should actually be working on it. I wasn't given a lot of well, I guess I was given that exercise. Another one I did for my hand, I kind of worked out on my own. Take a sticky note and you put it anywhere and you touch it 3 or 4 times with your affected hand, like I'm doing now. And then you can look away and you can still do it. And when you can't, you look back and you train yourself some more. And eventually you can move the sticky note, move it down, move it left, move it right. And eventually your brain will get that ability back.
Yes.
The hardest one with proprioception and an affected hand, in my opinion, is take your unaffected hand and put some change in that pocket, and you can tell a dime from a penny, which is the hardest thing to do. If you put it in your affected pocket, it's depending on what kind of sensitivity issues you have, that can be a difficult task. It is for me because I have paresthesia, so I either don't feel anything or I feel way too much.
Yeah, and that's uses a lot more areas of the brain. So proprioception is one of the main balance systems that we rely on, in addition to our vision. And then the third is our body position and our gyroscope in our brain, our vestibular system. But stereognosis actually uses a lot of cortical areas to work together. So it's even higher difficulty, to your good point, Ralph. But yes, we'll talk a little bit about proprioception. Okay, so let me.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Whoops, I need to move along on these. Okay, so falls happen. Falls happen to a lot of people, and as we all get older, and again, add any impairments from the stroke, they just kind of bump your risk up a little bit more. And here's stroke. You guys have all survived number 4, but don't be unaware of number 7 either, right? Is really the thing. It's a big issue. It's important for everybody, anyone in your family, your friends. And then it happens very frequently. People are falling all the time. Right now during this talk, there's people falling. So it's just good to be in mind that this is something that affects everybody. And it's right to be aware of it and to take steps to not fall. So what happens when we fall? Maybe we fall and we've been really lucky and we're fine. Maybe we're like, we should have been a stunt person. And we fall and we get up uninjured and we're like, I'm good at falling, which is valuable. In fact, it's one of the things we teach people with Parkinson's, because they tend to fall. And a lot of times their first hospitalization where they get diagnosed is because they fracture something and have to go to the hospital. We make sure they know how to fall well, because they fall a lot. But being able to get up and down and also prevent falls is also, of course, really good. So hip fractures tend to be because a person falls. We don't want to fracture our hips, so avoiding that is a really good thing. Traumatic brain injuries, you guys have had a stroke. You don't want a brain injury on top of it, right? That's a more diffuse brain injury. No, thank you, right? So if we can avoid that, all the better. They risk the chance of not being able to live independently on your own, right? Which is what I think all of us want to do. And then some people fall and it kills them. Like they don't recover from it because the fall either causes a bleed in the brain or some other injuries that are so devastating that the person's body can't recover. So again, really important. The cost in our healthcare. Oh yeah, Ralph, you want to go back?
What, I got a question. Why do you think, is there any science behind or any reason behind increasing 30% in 10 years is dramatic? And any reason? I mean, concrete isn't any harder than it used to be, and steps.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. You know, there's more people on the planet and driving, there's a lot more people on the road. There's also the things going on in the world where sometimes violence can fluctuate. But I will tell you that these numbers come from a site that you can all visit, and it's called Whiskers, WISQARS. And it is an epidemiological site. So it's all about the reporting of when somebody gets admitted and the cause was a fall and when the outcome is death. And so some of it could be changes in reporting, but I do think there's also trends, both because of the population density and some other factors. But to answer your question really honestly, I don't know exactly where that 30% increase comes from, like what causes.
That's a fair answer. It seems like it would be per capita or else it wouldn't be relevant data. So it's just a pretty dramatic increase. I didn't know if they'd figured out what might be causing it. Yeah, you don't want to fall, especially the older you get, because if you fracture your hip, you have a good chance of getting pneumonia and dying. You sure
right,
don't.
And why when you fall when you're a kid, right? Because kids learn to walk by falling all over the place. But they have flexible little bones. They're kind of rubbery, right? They haven't been fully dense. As we get older, our bone density tends to fall. And you may have had something called a DEXA scan. And that's where your doctor, when they see you every year, they should ask you about that, especially if you've been trending towards losing some bone density. But we get more porousness and we have stiffer. We're no longer bendable like we were when we were a toddler falling all over learning to walk. And so there's more brittle and it's got more gaps in it. So it's more likely to break. So there's changes. The other is for your brain. So you fall and it shakes things around in your head, or if somebody stops short and it jerks your head. Why can that cause a brain injury when you're older, when it might not have affected you at all when you were in your 20s or a teenager? Well, our arteries and our vessels get less bendable and flexible. And in fact, some of the changes in our brain and the distance between our skull, our calvarium, and those vessels in the brain can be a little bit larger than when we were young. And so those two factors together mean some of these bridging veins can actually have a stretch on it and fail on us. Whereas when we were younger, they wouldn't have. So a lot of different factors why the aging process adds to this.
Great.
Yeah, and it costs a lot of money, right? And not that the money is the important thing, because there's a lot of all kinds of things with our healthcare system and costs that we won't go into because it's a whole behemoth on its own. But falls cost a lot of money, meaning like this is a big issue on a lot of fronts. And then this is just breaking that down a little bit more of where the costs fall. Now, falls, again, this is that emphasis to your good question, Ralph, of it is an increasing burden. And it does break it down a little bit, right? So for older adults, 52 million people in 2018, 8 million were from injuries and 36 million, so the bulk were from falls. And you see similarly, the predominance of why older adults are needing to seek care for falls is, or for an injury, is actually from falls.
Like football players have to be really careful then.
Yeah, we'll talk about, so they fall all the time, right? That's part of their sport.
Mhm.
And they have all those concussive forces, both in their practices as well as in their gameplay. So yes, absolutely. In fact, there are a lot of the prominence of brain injury has come from the concussions and the constant and repetitive concussions over time, and something called CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, that some retired football players had that made it into the news, and they made that movie Concussion and all of that stuff. So yeah, absolutely, Winnie. So STEADI, let's talk about STEADI. So because of the burden and the issue, the prevalence of how many people fall, and the fact that we know this increases year over year, as well as we age, our government has an agency that is charged to police this, to measure it, to find out what's going on, and then say, wow, if this is a big and growing problem that costs a lot of money for no good ends, just to do the recovery from a fall, what can we do to reverse this, or at least slow it down or stop it from growing? And so they came up with what's called STEADI. And STEADI stands for Stopping Elderly Accidents, Deaths, and Injuries. So that's what that acronym means. And it's no mistake that it also sounds like steady, like we want to be steady and have our good balance. So this is our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, our CDC. And it's based on American British Geriatric Society clinical practice guidelines. Remember, that's when there's tons and tons of evidence, you make a clinical practice guideline. And it's also had input from healthcare providers who looked at geriatric populations and falls and balance. So there's a whole toolkit, and it's, again, freely available. You can download these things. I've sent a good handful of the stuff to Ralph for you guys to have access to without even going out to the CDC site, but you'll see that CDC site in this presentation as well. And it has things for screening, so that you can ask about this. If you're seeing providers and they're not asking you or doing this checklist, you might cue them and say, hey, I don't see you using the STEADI materials. Do you know about these? It's good to poke sometimes. Also then to have your clinicians assess for modifiable risk factors. So if there are things you could be changing to help you be more steady, they should be assessing that. And if it's stuff that you can improve on, they should be letting you know that, so you can keep yourself as steady as possible. And then interventions, which can be both at the provider level and also at the community level. Sometimes it's your YMCA or your local senior center might have some really nice programs. So here's again just the background of why. And here's some of the pretty little, we did one of these. Oh, it's not actually listed here. So the one I started this presentation with comes from this packet of information. These are all freely available. You can go online and pull these yourself. And again, there's a bundle of these Ralph is going to put up for you. Here's the little trifold ones. And you have some of these as well. I think we have the check for safety. We have the postural hypotension. And I think we have the stay independence that I found particularly helpful. So I uploaded those to Ralph for you. And here's our 12 steps of what STEADI's trying to do. Assess for practice change across all of the US providers and communities. So it's not limited just to hospitals. It's also things like your YWCA, YMCA, and your senior centers and other groups. Assess what activities are currently going on for falls, identify champions and prevention teams, make sure that there's good leadership support. Nothing can be sustained if there's not good leadership that is saying this is important, making sure the resources are maintained and driven for that. And then have clinical fall prevention programs that get implemented. So making sure these things happen. And then look within the community at the resources. So somewhere in your community, I hope, somebody is doing some version of this or a variation on the CDC. There's one called the Otago, there's one called Moving On, but there are a number of these wonderful community-based fall programs. So if you do ask around, you might come back with even more resources, which is fun. All right.
Hi, Julie.
Yes.
Could you go back one more page? That one right here. Could you send me the information in the stay independent trifold you were talking about? Just
Absolutely. Yes. And I'll actually, I think I have it open where I'll even open it up and walk through it with you. You got it.
thank you.
Absolutely.
That would be excellent.
Yeah.
That would be
Oh,
excellent.
Anything that Julie ever sends me, I put with the post, and I also put it in the description of on the YouTube video. Like last time, it was VA link, and I put it both on the post, and I put it on the post. I put a call for I said she helps us by sharing her knowledge. How about helping her by sharing our knowledge for the survey she's doing or trial she's doing? So anything I get, I'll any associated materials I'll put or pass on.
All right, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, a handful of these are going to be uploaded. This is one of them. And so this is the first 6 of the steps that the CDC is charged with. So they have to monitor, do these things, and then report on them, and then have a plan for the things that aren't moving in the right direction. So again, having this workflow, adapting health records. So they're really reaching out and helping people adapt the health records to better assess, monitor, and implement to improve and reduce falls. Having people who are assigned to do it in healthcare, train people, implement how to monitor this, and then having reimbursement, right? If you're not paying for it, it's not going to last either. And here's some successful examples. So one's from Oregon and one's for New York, and then you see how they monitor the screenings. So even just if you think about the last time you went to your health provider, if they didn't screen you and ask specific questions about fall prevention, you see where that's not completely surprising, but it'd be better if they did. And you see where there's people reporting in saying, hey, you know what, we implemented these nice tools that the CDC and other groups have created for us. And then we monitor to see, and we're doing a better job. So we're self-policing even within. Here is a direct link. So you don't need me and Ralph. We're there to help you, but even without us, you can fish for yourself. I think that's always the best way. So www.cdc.gov/STEADI. So www.cdc.gov/STEADI. And you'll see it might be even a little overwhelming. There's so many materials, but you have access to all these downloadables as well. So here's the, oh, there it is. So what does a clinician look at when they assess your balance? So you say, well, I don't know if my clinician assessed my balance. If they might have sneakily done it and not said so. Well, the things that they would be looking at your balance, if they're doing a good job, is one is ask you to describe your balance if you've had any near falls, if you felt unsteady. So they'll want your personal expression of any balance dysfunction or impairment. They'll ask and they'll look for problems associated with moving your head, because our head is so specifically important, right? It has our visual system, it has a gyroscope for our sense of motion. And then all of our somatosensory comes up and interfaces up here as well. So they'll look at head movement specifically. They'll ask you about limitations moving around and doing the things you need to do in a day. If you're finding you're altering those, or you've stopped doing them, or they take longer. And they'll ask you about feeling like if you're having feelings like the world's spinning, vertigo, or nausea, like, oh, sometimes when I move around, I get nauseous. So these kind of tie in with your vestibular system, although they could be from other things as well, like, having a virus or something. And then your history of falls. They should ask about that too. They'll also take your vitals, that's your blood pressure, your breathing rate, your pulse, and your temperature. That tells a lot about what's in our black box, right? Is our vitals. And then your endurance. How do your vitals do? And how much can you walk around over time, and for what distance? And how do your vitals respond to that? Is it a big jump just to walk on a level surface to get into that doctor's exam room from the parking lot? Or do you not even really change your blood pressure because you've got pretty good endurance? That's really important, and that affects your balance as well. The next is your strength. Maybe your doctor says, squeeze my fingers, and they try to shake their hand out. They're checking your grip strength because that's been identified as a key indicator. If you don't only have a few minutes, and doctors are rushed to do a lot in a little bit amount of time. So checking your strength in a nice functional way, like having you grip their hand, they've found that there's good evidence to say grip tells us a lot more than just what the grip strength is. If somebody's grip is weak, they're going to have muscular weakness more diffusely. And so a strong grip at least says, okay, we know that at least we've got a strong grip. So it's a nice baseline. They'll also look at trunk muscles. If as you get tired, you tend to slump over, or you find that sitting up tall starts to hurt your back because your muscles are a little weak back there, that'll be important too for your balance. Key muscles in your hips help you get up and down and help you with walking. So those are very important in balance. And your knee and your ankle, obviously you're using those as you're walking around and getting up from sitting and getting down to sitting and controlling that so you can sit safely. So these leg muscles at these different joints are very important. So they might ask you to stand up on your toes, or they might even grab your foot and ask you not to let them push it. A nice way to check your hip strength, and a nice exercise to do as well, is to get up from standing nice and slowly and very controlled. And like we did with our mindful breathing, you want to breathe and you want to notice what you feel and where your weight is across one leg or the other, and how fast you're going. And a nice challenge is to try to do it a little slower and a little more smoothly. And sitting down slower uses lots and lots of muscle. So more fibers get used when you do what's called an eccentric contraction. So standing up and trying to sit down slowly versus plopping into the chair or sitting down quickly is actually a nice strengthening exercise and very functional. So that's strength. Flexibility at your neck. Mine crackles today. It means I am not doing enough things to help my flexibility with my neck. But taking the time to just rotate your neck, ear to shoulder, looking up, looking down. Maybe do that with your nice, deep meditative breathing. Your shoulders, getting that good mobility in your shoulders. Also your trunk, your knees, your ankles, and your hips. If you have tightness in those, they can't be there to act like shock absorbers and move dynamically if you start to be a little unsteady. And that's what their job is to right the ship. If something slips under you, you get the banana peel, you get the icy patch on the hiking trail or on the stair.
Could I comment?
Go ahead.
Could I comment for a minute on one thing?
Please. Yes.
We're talking about neck flexibility.
Yes.
And I should caution people to be very careful with their neck. For example, if I were you, I would never let a chiropractor crack my neck. And I know that some people do that on their own. They'll rapidly move their neck back and forth and crack it. Unfortunately, I've read of too many cases of that causing a stroke. That is, not being very careful with your neck can tear blood vessels in your neck and cause a stroke. If you do it on your own, or if a chiropractor does it, I would strongly advise not doing that. Be extremely careful with your neck. I'll be quiet.
Yes, yes, thank you, Bruce. In fact, I think on the news over this long weekend, there was a story of a young, healthy pickleball player and something with, and I don't play pickleball, so you guys can laugh at my ignorance with the sport, but something with like snapping his head rapidly for his sport. He had a stroke. I think he had 2 or 3, and it was that rapid kind of ballistic movement in his neck.
Yes, yes, you've got to be very careful. And I read something, this was probably a couple of months ago, where a woman, and I can't remember the details, unfortunately, but she was having some trouble and went to a chiropractor and ended up, I think, paralyzed on both sides of her body because of what he did to her neck.
Yeah.
So you've got to be extremely careful with your neck. Any manipulation you do yourself or any manipulation anyone else does. Be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, head and neck are so special and have so many extra important things that they do for us with our balance and with life and thinking and all of that. And there's vessels that run right up the back and up into there where these rapid adjustments or movements are definitely put you at risk. But having said that, it should not keep you from having good range of motion, but it should be gentle. Things you do, you can do it in lying down to even be more gentle, but you don't want to lose the ability to rotate your head, to have your head able to move, because your muscles over time will get tight, and then your ability to look over the periphery or to catch something out of the side of your eye starts to be minimized, and it knocks down your peripheral vision and mobility, and that can also reduce your balance. So did I say that okay, Bruce? Jump in there if I've overstated. Okay, good. So yes, neither one of us are saying don't get full range of motion, but be gentle, do it with breathing, and don't do it aggressively or ballistically. And then medication review, lots of medications. If you need them, right? If they're saving your life, if they're keeping your blood pressure and other things in check, you absolutely want to do them. However, sometimes you're going to multiple physicians, and over time, people are adding medications, and maybe they're not double checking what another doctor, or maybe that they don't know about this other doctor or some old medication you're taking. And so you start to have extra that might actually start to be working against you, or the side effects of one and the side effects of the other together really make it even, it's not 1 + 1 is 2, it's 1 + 1 is like 5. They can have damaging effects on your ability to feel balanced and increase your risk of falls. So it's prudent to ask your pharmacist when you go pick up your meds, if they want to take a review and say, you know, what do you think about your risk for falls based on these medications? Talk with your doctor. Make sure you let your doctor know of other doctors and other medications you might have, even if they're old ones you hang on to. I know my family, they tend to like to hang on and not lose anything. So they'll have old stuff that should have been put in the depository for disposal. And it's not safe, right? So I prod them, and I definitely let my doctor know if I have stuff that I might be taking over the counter too. You want to reduce this, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 things. I would also say be very careful about taking medications. If you're supposed to take them after eating, be sure to do so, because otherwise it'll get into your bloodstream too quickly and have a greater effect than you want. So
Yes,
be careful
thank
to take
you.
them as prescribed.
Yes, and some medications can be really fussy, right? You should take it with
Yes.
milk or not take it with dairy. You shouldn't take it with grapefruit, you know, whatever it is, when the doctor gives you that, a lot of times they can be coming at you and you're just trying to process stuff from the exam. Don't be hesitant to ask them to review and say, is there anything that I should be doing to maximize the effectiveness of this medication? Don't hesitate to make that a conversation, because medications are important and they do an important role, but they also have some side effects, and they might be less effective based on just how you're taking them, the time of day or what you're taking them with.
Yes,
So-
and you mentioned grapefruit. In general, I would advise you not to drink any grapefruit juice or eat grapefruit if you're on medications, because grapefruit juice will alter the metabolism of drugs. So just stop eating grapefruit. If I were
Well, there you go. I hope no one on here has stock in grapefruits. We just kind of dinged them. And then the last is, oh, go ahead.
Question.
Yeah.
What if you had a car accident and you telling us not to have your neck fussed with? What you supposed to do then?
Wait, if you had a car accident, and what was the second part of what you said, Winnie?
And what you're supposed to do if you had stiff neck or something?
Oh, yeah. How long ago was the car accident?
I had mine in 85.
Okay, so not recent, so that's good. So the looking at why it's stiff, if no one's ever looked at it and you're concerned, I would ask the doctor to look at it. But if it's stiff because it was injured way back when, and since then you've stopped moving it, which sometimes we do, then just starting with some gentle stretches, and you can start before you get out of bed, or when you lay down to go to bed, just taking those deep breaths, seeing how far your head will move to one side. And then when I get to where I start to feel a little stretch, I'll take a breath and I'll actually try to think about, visualize breathing into the area where I feel it's a little tight. And I try to visualize also that it's like taffy and that it's melting. And then I'll go back, but gentle, it should feel good. And you start to do that every day. And it's a way to reward yourself, to be kind to yourself, but it also should start to get your neck to feel less stiff.
Okay, can I?
if I were you, I would go to a physical therapist or a physician. And this is just me personally saying this. I personally would not go to a chiropractor to have your neck examined. So go to a physical therapist or a physician.
Right. And to add to what Bruce is saying, even some physical therapists now will do what the chiropractors tend to do, these adjustments, and they're these kind of aggressive pulses of the spine. And if you haven't been doing just some nice gentle stretches with breathing, that's really probably what's going to make your neck feel really good. And it's a nice exercise to do.
What about putting heat on it?
Oh, and heat, if you like heat, Winnie, always is good. Heat, no more than 20 minutes, and make sure it feels good. It shouldn't be too hot.
All right.
Yeah, anything that feels good is I'm for it. And heat, I like heat too. Some people don't like heat, they like cold, and cold actually would be okay too, even though it seems counterintuitive, right? Because you're like, I want my muscles to be nice and squishy and be like that taffy. For me, the heat does it. Some people just don't like heat, and that's okay to use cold in those cases. Oh, and I missed the last one. The most important, what is important to you? Your clinicians should know, and they should be asking you, what is it that you're worried about losing the ability to do, that you've been doing less of and you want to get back to, or that you want to restart doing that you've lost ability to do because of your balance? Your goals should include that. It should tie to the thing that's making you actually pursue this, because why would you take your time and your effort if it's not going to add meaning to your life and make your life better? It always should tie to that. So here, as Ralph kind of stole my thunder, because you guys have been studying on balance. I love it. So your vision, again, incredibly powerful. That 30% of your brain being focused on vision, the fact that it'll have you believing things even when you know they're not true. Your body will start to respond to them if your vision says to. Really important. Now, as we get older, a lot of times, if the somatosensory and vestibular systems have been degraded, if we've not been working on those, and if they've got some decreased capacity, Some of it might be age related, but a lot of times it's just because we haven't been challenging ourselves, and the systems either gain capacity when we push them, progressively overload them like we do with our exercises, or they diminish capacity, right? Your energy goes where you put it. So if these started somatosensory and vestibular have not really been challenged and they're a little diminished, you're going to start to over rely on your vision. And so that's probably, like Winnie, to your great example of your therapist saying, don't look at your feet, carry the 10-pound weight. She's ramping up you using your somatosensory and vestibular systems and having you decrease your reliance on your vision as part of your therapy exercise, right? So she's challenging system 2 and system 3. So if you say, okay, we've got our systems checked, system 1, vision, system 2, somatosensory, and that's knowing where my limb is in space, that Ralph said so nicely earlier, as well as knowing the motion of my body in space. Am I upright? Am I tilted to the right? Am I moving forward? That's system 3. So system 1, we all tend to over rely on, unless we have blindness or visual dysfunction that makes that work against us. System 2 and system 3 for most people, and again, this is most people, it is not tailored to each of you individually, tend to have opportunity for us to improve. And there's exercises you could do to improve those. So somatosensory, just to kind of go into detail, if to add to Ralph's earlier example, if you close your eyes and touch, you should be able to touch your nose and go out and touch your nose again. You should be able to do it with your other hand if your other hand and arm is working. You can do the same thing with your legs. So if we're talking about walking around stuff, you can take your heel of one foot and raise it up to your knee. And your doctor might have done this in the hospital, and then slide it straight down the front of your shin to the toe of the other foot, and then slide it smoothly up to the knee and back down. You see me moving. I know you can't see my leg, but I'm doing it, testing myself. And then you do the same thing with the other leg again, if that leg is able to move in that pattern. Now, if you do that with your eyes closed and you find that you miss or it's wobbling all over the place, that on its own can be a really nice exercise to work on your proprioceptive sense, your sense of where your limb is in space, which you don't have to look at because you've got these receptors in your joints and your muscles that give that information to your brain. But if you never ask your brain to use that, it may be a little bit out of practice. And so practicing it by doing things like closing your eyes and trying to hit a target with a toe. Ralph gave the great example of the sticky, pointing to the sticky. And then after you do it a few times, closing your eyes and doing it, you can do from a safe seated position or even laying on the bed, pick a target or have a cone or something you put and you touch, and then close your eyes and see if you can accurately and efficiently get there. Those are wonderful, simple proprioceptive exercises you can do. And of course, you can do them in standing and make them more dynamic, which he also gave great examples of in parallel bars using a wooden step and things like that. And then vestibular is that sense of moving around, which you use by doing things like turning your head while you're walking and different activities where there's motion involved while you're moving of the head.
For those, if I can interrupt, for those of you that aren't aware, the vestibular system is located in the bony labyrinth in the inner ear. You've got 3 semicircular canals and 2 other areas that give you your sense of orientation and acceleration. For example, if you're going up and down in an elevator or forward on a train or whatever, that sense comes from the vestibular system, which is in your inner ear. And there's some diseases like Meniere's disease that can damage the vestibular system. So if you begin to feel off balance or something, it could be a problem in your vestibular system.
Is there a part of the, I guess I knew that all that, but I have this feeling I like to always make sure that I'm correct, or if I'm not, correct myself. Is there not some part of the brain that's also a part of the vestibular system?
Yeah. Well, there must be somewhere, but
There
it's
has to
clearly in
be.
your inner ear.
Yeah, and any and every sensory aspect of our perception has a dedicated cortical area. And it is like right near where you see where Bruce pointed of that inner ear.
I've had terrible balance issues as a result of the stroke. That I had to, I had to overcome those, but with all these, but there has to be some sort of vestibular system. There has to be some sort of connection with some part of the brain, somewhere around the brainstem. There has to be, because
Well, I'm not trying to pry, and it's none of my business. I don't know where your stroke was, but your cerebellum is involved in balance. And if there's damage to parts of your cerebellum, which is on the back of your brainstem,
yeah,
you can have what's
yeah.
called cerebellar ataxia.
yeah, yeah. I'm a candidate. That's what I got. Yeah.
I also know 2 stroke survivors who had brainstem strokes, and there seems to be some balance issues associated with brainstem strokes as well. I just figure the whole back of the brain kind of controls balance and also
Because between your
your
eyes.
cerebellum puts the 2 sides together. So there's a lot of important stuff that's going on in the back of your brain and all those little parts that most of us don't know the names of.
Well,
Well,
the
and-
cere-
and-
the
oh, go ahead.
cerebellum is on the back of your pons.
Right.
Your brainstem has got the midbrain, pons, and medulla, and on the back of the pons is the cerebellum. It looks sort of like a little head of cauliflower.
Mhm.
And there are 3 giant inputs and outputs called the cerebellar peduncles. And if they're damaged, you're going to damage the input and output of the cerebellum. The cerebellum's got timing circuits in it. It's responsible for ballistic movements. A ballistic movement is one that once started can't be corrected. It's like a ballistic missile. Once it's fired, you can't change its trajectory. So if you're like playing tennis, your cerebellum controls your hand-eye coordination. You have to coordinate the swing of your hand with the visual input of the tennis ball. That's all done with these timing circuits in your cerebellum.
Wouldn't that be the motor cortex?
No, the motor cortex is in the front of your brain.
Yeah, but
That's
isn't that all tied together?
interesting. That's interesting. You mentioned timing, because when I remember, like, within probably the first week of when I woke up from my coma, when I'd listened to music I had previously listened to, it was slower. Like normally the BPMs are what, like 130 or something for a song, but like what I was hearing was like maybe 80 BPMs or something. It just sounded slower, and it was the weirdest thing. And engines sounded like more growlier, like they sounded slower. It was really weird.
Yeah, so, oh, go ahead, Bruce.
No, I can't. I'm not a neurologist, and I don't know exactly what caused that.
I
No,
just-
I
I lo-
understand.
I
I
lo-
wasn't asking you. It was just a little quip
Yeah.
or
So,
what.
so a couple of things. Boy, you guys are so fun to talk to. We could just do neuroscience talks. So your processing speed and that perception of hearing may also have been one of the tracks that was affected in the stroke. To have it sound different, and then the other part is when we talked about the brainstem. So as Bruce said, the cerebellum is really important in your feeling like your balance is very different and you're walking after your stroke. But that brainstem part, there's nucleus for your vestibular system. So the cranial nerves, again, your head and neck are particularly important. And your vestibular system is one of the cranial nerves, is your vestibular cochlear nerve. The nuclei, and it has multiple, are in the brainstem. And so that's yet another area. So there's multiple areas in both the cerebellum and the brain where those pathways and how they interact to help your balance, at any one of those, they can be disrupted, right? And that will affect your balance. Knowing where the stroke happened and knowing what the impairments are that you have are all things that a good assessment by your clinician, they should identify that. And then along with your goals, they should find things that you can be doing to improve your balance, right? So the things that you can work on to get, make your balance better and get back to the things you want to get back to more. Yeah, great discussion. Okay. Okay, vision. So again, along with your vestibular system, your eyes work really closely in combination with it. No surprise, right? They're kind of the head honcho. They take over, and when in doubt, your eyes are going to take over, and they tell us what to believe even when we know better. So they look at your head position and motion in combination with your vestibular system. And then also just knowing what's going on in the periphery so you can plan. And even if it's split seconds, your central nervous system uses that, much of which is below your level of perception. You're not even aware, but your eyes and your brain and your sensory systems are taking in information to know what it can ignore, and also to get you ready to do things even without being aware of it. So that's really important. And again, that verticality and head movement, it also your eyes play a role in that. And then your vestibular system, that moving around, it's that gyroscope. So like in your cell phone or your computer, if you turn it and the image just knows how to turn, it never keeps up. So it's not as good as our vestibular system, but I like that. There's a gyroscope in our phone. We have these two matching ones that are way more complex and way smarter than our smartphones in our brain, that look at acceleration, deceleration, all of those different things, if we're going up and down versus lateral. And then sensory. I wanted to talk a little bit more about sensory. It seems so obvious, right? Oh yeah, I feel my feet in my shoes. I feel my legs are strong beneath me, or they feel a little squishy. That's that proprioceptive sense and that tension.
That was one thing that happened when this was happening, is like I was just like, the back of my head started hurting. I was at my friend's house. I was sitting on the dock. I got in the boat under my own power. We drove to shore. We were getting out of the boat, and I was halfway out of the boat, and my vestibular system obviously just quit. Everything just stopped because I just dropped over backwards, and I didn't even feel like I was losing my balance. I just dropped.
Wow. It sounds like you remember that like it was yesterday too.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So again, your toes, your ankles, your knees, your hands and fingers, the touching your nose with your eyes closed, or touching a point on the wall, and being able to touch it even after you close your eyes, touching your heel to your opposite knee and up and down smoothly with your eyes closed, or touching a point with your toe multiple times with your eyes closed. These are all nice ways to test that. But basically, if I ask you to close your eyes, and I, as your clinician, move your arm in a position, or your hand in a position, or your foot in a position, or your toe in a position, I should be able to ask you to match it with your other toe or hand, or whichever body part I move. And you should be able to match it pretty much exactly if your proprioception is good. And that's a real easy way to test. Fun to do at parties. Ha, ha, ha. And a nice way to also work on that too, to say, wow, I can't tell where this toe is. Well, that's good to know and share with your clinician, and to say, is there something I can be doing to improve this? And then for standing, this is quiet standing. So just standing still. You'll find that if you close your eyes and you're still standing still, if they take a force plate or someone's observing you, they'll see that you'll sway a little bit more when you close your eyes. If you really reliant on your vision, you'll sway a lot more. And that is an indicator that we should be checking more of that somatosensory and vestibular system to see which one is the most impaired that maybe we can boost to make that less visually dependent. Now, perturbed sitting or standing, perturbed would mean like reactionary balance, right? So somebody bumps you at the mall, you bump into something while you're walking through your house that you didn't expect. And so now you have to make an adjustment quickly that you didn't plan. So in that one, if it's a little bump, your ankles are supposed to be able, those muscles are supposed to be able to right you, to change tension and kick in the right components and amounts, one leg versus the other. If it's a bigger bump, it should be getting your ankles and your knees. And if it's a really big bump, it's your hips. So again, those hips are a really important part of balance. And in responding to a surprise or even a slip on the ice, those having strong and resilient and nice flexible hip muscles is going to be helpful.
And
So-
don't forget about core.
Yeah, now let's talk about core. And then the next thing I wanted to just emphasize is that how we organize our body systems, it all is happening in our brain. And you guys kind of already had that discussion, right? Talking about what part of the brain is vestibular and why is balance off and where might the stroke have been to affect the balance in a certain way. The way that any one system gets information up to the brain might have been affected by stroke, right? And it also can be dampened just by disuse over time and by our aging process. If we're not using it, we tend to diminish the capacity of any system we use, even when we're young kids, right? So you study a certain subject, you get really good at it. You stop doing another subject when they don't make you in school anymore, and you tend to not be as good at it. That happens with your sensory systems and these interactions too. And there's a couple of fellas, some of my favorite neuro fellas are Klein and Jones, and their papers really gave us these tenets of neuroplasticity. And one is use it and improve it. Another is use it or lose it, right? And another is that if you combine using something in a situation over and over again, the neurons and the way they fire get to be more efficient and it happens more readily. They actually change physiologically and the structures of them so that the tendency and the amount of work to get it to fire and the speed with which it fires is going to change. So these interactions between our vestibular system, our visual system, our somatosensory system, and these cues in the context, the places and the ways that we use our balance or want our balance to be better are actually really good place to look at and thinking about how do I make my balance better, because that context matters and the practice of it matters. So finding a safe way to practice as close to what it is that you want to get back to. It's nice when it's logical, it's kind of intuitive, right? The more you practice doing it and the more you do put yourself in a safe way to practice that, the better we should be able to get your balance, as long as there's capacity in those systems. Any one of them, right? And since there's a bunch of them working together, that gives us a lot to work with. Incoming sensory information, which is, again, we are this big animal feeding information to our brain, and it tells us and it integrates all of that to help us with our balance. So thinking about any changes in your sensory input, if it's a duller sensation, or if you have the paresthesias where your sensory information is changed in a part of your body, are there things you can do to enhance that, or to take the systems that are less impaired, but there's maybe a little bit of a change, to increase that signal to the brain so it has what it needs to use in processing and increasing our balance? That's really the crux of a good balance program, is to look what you have, look where there's some gaps and that are keeping you from doing the stuff you want to do, and then using whatever you have to come up with a way to practice that to get you back to those things. So again, we're talking about the cerebellum, the basal ganglia. That's another thing that helps with motor planning, along with the cerebellum, that Bruce talked about so nicely, as well as your motor cortex and supplementary motor area. So these guys talk to each other. It's not like my job is movement, my job is balance. It's really this back and forth. It's a conversation, really brilliant conversation going on between these areas of the brain. And it's constantly changing and updating as we move and get feedback from our environment of how successful a movement was. And if there's other things to be thinking of, it's pretty amazing. And all of this, of course, when it works the best, we're not even aware of it, right? Our central nervous system is just taking care of us. However, we can shape it and we can improve it through exercises and our awareness. So going back to the couple times ago when I joined you guys, and Ralph's mention of not trying to multitask and do things while you're walking, I just want to take a moment and think about how we can be kind to ourselves and our bodies that take care of us with everything they've been through. What if there's times that you're walking and you find that you're multitasking or trying to, and instead you did some mindful breathing and coordinated it with feeling the weight and the way you're moving your legs and how balanced you feel. And if you're leaning to the right or to the left, and the feeling of your legs swinging, does it feel good? Does your trunk feel like it's upright? Are you slouching? When I'm stressed or I'm not being kind to myself, I find I lean forward and I bend inward. So when I say, you know what, I should be kind to myself, I'll immediately have my head will come back up, my shoulders will go back up, my heart will be a little bit more towards the sky. What if we're doing that when we're walking? You know, if there's such a nice opportunity to be tuned in to our limbs, my foot, my ankle, my knee, my hips, my trunk, my shoulders, my neck and my head. If I'm to the right or to the left, my breathing. And that's a nice way to get back to that mindful breathing and also to increase that sensory awareness that we're feeding to that brain that's helping us with our balance, right? If I can give my brain more information by shifting my awareness to be aware of what my limbs are doing and thinking about my walking in a real positive way, I'm also helping it to orient and use the tools even more. I'm enhancing the signal for it to use to give me good balance. Okay. So again, touch is another one. And I love the somatosensory of recognizing coins, the difference between a dime and a penny or a nickel and a penny in your hand. So somatosensory information processes really fast. If you move a muscle, the fiber thickness and the amount of myelination makes it super fast. So it's like the high-speed train of sensory input. It goes really quickly compared to other sensory inputs. And then our visual and vestibular inputs. So when sensory input from one system are inaccurate, what happens is your brain, again, your central nervous system has to know to ignore certain information. I love that example Bruce gave of a pipe. If visually you put prisms on and it looks bent, you need to ignore that, right? Like, oh, I know my vision's off, but I know I need to walk this way and not start to walk this way. I'll bump the wall. It's really hard to do that. It's taxing. It takes a lot of cortical power. And unless you train yourself where you can start to ignore it and your brain just tunes it out, it'll keep throwing you and it's exhausting. It'll really wear you out. So this is the stuff that we're trying to train our nervous system by doing things repetitively that help us in the context we want with our balance. And again, more than one system is needed to give you the information you need to do all the stuff you want to do using good balance. And so changing the environmental conditions, so the chair can be higher or lower. You can have the TV on or not on, have noise distraction in the background would be some examples of that to challenge yourself. So what I wanted to do is share one of the tests that a physical therapist might do in looking at your balance. And it kind of gets at a lot of the stuff we've talked about. So this is a test called the Clinical Test for Sensory Interaction and Balance, or the CATSIB, we call it. And a lot of times people will call it a foam and dome test. And a lot of times it's modified and they don't do the dome. This is like supposed to be like a big lantern-y thing. And the fancy newer stuff is a visual surround that moves and is disorienting. But so here's a person, they're standing on a flat level surface, right? So a nice linoleum or wooden floor. And you see, how do they do standing? So they're just standing there for an amount of time. Are they swaying a lot? Are they losing their balance? Do they have to move their feet? Or are they pretty steady? So that's a nice static balance. Now we take away the visual system. We'll have you close your eyes or they'll put a blindfold on. And again, we already talked about this. What do you expect to happen for anybody? Take vision away. Same person standing on a nice level surface. So we expected them to have a little more sway, right? So it's almost like the vestibular and somatosensory systems are like, wait a minute, juice up the signal. And a way to do that is to have a little bit more of swaying to get that information in, since we lost that visual input. So now, because now we just have two systems to feed our balance, a little bit more wiggly. Now, if we have that same person and they can see, but there's a confusing visual input, like Bruce's example of the prism shifting the pipe to make it look bent when you know it's not. This is also challenging because now I have visual input that not only, so worse than being gone, it's giving me misinformation, right? It's throwing me a curve. And so this is another way to challenge the balance. And so what we do in this test is we do these first three. Now we add for the next three a foam cushion. And so now you're getting some confused input because the ground is not nice and flat and solid. And we do again with eyes open. Then we do it again with the eyes, the vision taken away with a blindfold. And then we do it with confused visual information. The reason that they do these 6 steps to test for balance is, again, goes back to the fact that there's 3 systems that we use, and they integrate all of the information constantly in our brain in order to keep our balance. And so when a clinician does this test, and sometimes there's these machines that they'll ask you to stand on, and the floor will move. Instead of foam, it's the floor under your feet is actually rocking. The dome now is a visual display that's going at angles and stuff like that. Is they're looking to say, do we have the visual system? Do we have the vestibular system? Do we have the sensory system? And if we can take away multiple of those and really have you heavily reliant on one system, and that one you do the worst on, then it tells us that that's where the most effort could be put to improve, as well as if there's some deficits in the other ones, right? Okay, so enough about that test. And has anyone had that test?
No.
Okay, yeah, Abraham has, okay. And so here you go, eyes open, you've got your vestibular system is helping you and your vision, but your somatosensory when you're on the foam surface is going to be inaccurate. So worse than being not kicked in, you're getting inaccurate information. So it's being challenged. You can't trust it. The eyes closed with the compliant surface or the foam, you don't have vision, and you have inaccurate somatosensory. So you're really relying on vestibular. So if you do great on that one, then it says, okay, we can check off and say vestibular system seems to be okay. And then this last one, we have vestibular and inaccurate for somatosensory and vision. That's even harder to really tax the vestibular system.
I don't ever remember them putting like any sensory deprivation kind of things in my face.
Yeah.
But
a lot
like,
of times they
I
modify it.
I pretty much failed right at the blindfold part.
So they didn't need to, but a
Like,
lot of
I'm
places too, the dome, they'll they'll modify, they don't do the dome.
I'm
Unless they
getting
have
a
this
little
balance system.
better without my eyesight. My if I close my eyes, my balance does feel better than it did. But I mean, I've done a lot of the other stuff like the ankle and like strengthening the ankles and the hips and the core and all that, and yeah, and I sway, and I don't think I've ever got this kind of information, and it's like lighting up all these bells, and it's great.
Oh,
'Cause,
good,
I
good, good.
mean, and there, like, no one ever took the time to explain anything of what happened to me. It was undiagnosed. No one really took the time to figure out anything about it. They just kind of like, oh, well, it happened.
Huh, yeah.
So yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad this is helpful. So some of the things that I would do, and I don't know, I haven't met you in person to see your balance or test it out, but when there's a lot of deficits that seem to be from the cerebellum, a couple of the tricks up my sleeve I like to pull out is, one is there's a strategic torso weighting, because there's some of the channels of that feed sensory and vestibular information in different ways through our trunk might still be there. And so again, we tap everything we can. So if other things haven't worked, some people find little bits of weight strategically placed based on the direction that you sway with eyes open and eyes closed, can actually make a big difference and help with your balance. But you test it using that test I just walked through with you. The other is for proprioception. Again, how do we juice up the signal on something that's there, and does it make a difference? Maybe they've done this, Abraham. I'm eager to hear. Has anyone put just like some cuff weights on your legs?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
did
way back at the beginning, like they had to put cuff weights on my wrists and on my legs.
And did it help at the time?
Oh yeah, at the time it
Yeah.
helped.
So all they
immensely.
were doing there, right, in terms of what we just talked about, is they were juicing up the amount of signal getting to your brain for your proprioceptors, right? Because if the weight of your limb is what's giving that proprioceptive sensation, right, the pulling, now we've added weight, so it's juicing up the signal to give your brain a louder signal. And my favorite go-to to explain that conceptually is, I'm sorry, I'll just apologize ahead of time. I'm a Dr. Seuss fan. Horton Hears a Who. Remember Horton Hears a Who? Does anybody know? I love Horton Hears a Who. So there's this little universe living on this puff, right? And in this big world, people think it's nothing. And they have to get that signal. They have to get every little who to holler at the same time. And it took every one of them to yell so it was audible, so they were recognized. And our brain sometimes needs that signal enhanced, and it's what's going to tip it that little bit. And it was the baby who in Horton Hears a Who. You guys can make fun of me for all time now for bringing up Horton Hears a Who, which I think you probably all read when you were 5. But it works. It's a great metaphor for what our brain needs and why adding weights to your limbs would make your balance better. Like why, some people would say like, well, intuitively, wouldn't that make it harder? Because you're now making it more taxing to walk. And it's like, it's not about the taxing. Your muscles can do it. It's about sending signal up to the brain of where the limb is in space. It needs that extra signal. So anyway, fun stuff to talk about. I love this stuff. So here's some takeaways. Sitting to standing, just doing that as an exercise right there in your living room in your favorite chair, especially if it's a low chair that's hard to get in and out of. Wonderful exercise, very functional. Doesn't cost monthly dues. You don't have to get special clothes on. You don't have to have any clothes on. You're in your home. And it's a wonderful exercise, and it definitely gets those muscle groups that help with your balance. The key with doing this is no plopping in the chair and no boosting yourself up like a rocket. Slow as you can go. So as you get better, try to go slower. I love it, Ralph. Ralph's already doing it. And he crosses his arms, so he's making sure he's doing it as hard as possible. So with the arm rest would be to start. As you get better and you feel like I got this, and it's smooth and it's controlled, now I'm going to try it with my arms down on my legs or my arms up at my chest. And if I really want to get good at it and I'm like, this is getting too easy, I may put my arms out in front of me, right? So slow and controlled. The slower you go sitting down in particular, the more muscles that you're recruiting. So you're getting extra juice from your squeeze, if you will. Because eccentric contractions, keeping your legs, letting them bend only so slowly, recruits a lot more muscle fibers than concentric contractions. So you get a lot of workout just by sitting down really slowly. If that gets too easy, what can you do? You can hang on to that 10-pound weight that Wendy was mentioning, or therapist has her doing on the stairs. Hang on to a weight or hold something or have your arms up as you sit down. Make sure you never stop breathing, right? So you always want to try to coordinate it with your breath. And I know saying that sounds so simple and obvious, but we all know it can be really hard to coordinate your breathing, and it takes mindfulness and thinking and saying what feels good. When do I breathe in? When do I breathe out? Am I forgetting to breathe? Am I holding my breath? I'll catch myself and I'll just make sure I start to breathe again. And then feel what you feel in your body. How do you feel moving? Do you feel an arc of motion? Does it feel good? Do you feel that your weight is more on one side versus the other? Can you, on the next time you do it, shift the weight so it's a little bit more even? Can you maybe put it more over one leg and then the next time over the other? Play around with that. The next is your pharmacist and physician can review your medications and talk with you about how they might influence your risk of falls, and if there's any alternatives that might be available that would reduce your risk of falls. And to Bruce's great example, might also just include the same medications, but when you take them and what you're eating or not eating when you take them to make them the most effective. The third is, and I didn't really touch on this a lot for time, but you guys had somebody do a talk on sleep, and I think you've had people talk about nutrition. Both of these are incredibly important in reducing your risk of falls. Your body uses energy that you get from your nutrition. It's what feeds all your cells, including your nervous system, make the electrical grid happy and working. And then your sleep is also where consolidation happens for your memory. And I don't know about you guys, but if I don't get good sleep, especially if there's something going on like a pandemic that we all went through, or recovering from an illness or a loss of a family member or something else where your sleep gets disrupted, you might notice your thinking starts to feel foggy. Things that you used to do automatically, you have to stop and think about it, might forget things. Being forgetful is the kind of thing that can throw you off just enough and be the difference between being steady and having a fall or a near fall. So don't undervalue the importance of sleep. And I'll leave that at that because somebody else has talked about that. And your flexibility. If you're flexible, it's like having those shock absorbers in your car that if they're too tight, you feel every bump and things don't ride so well, right? Well, it's the same with your balance for your body. If they're too tight, you're not going to be able to respond nice and resiliently, especially when something surprises you in that reactive balance situation where something bumps you or you accidentally bump into something that you didn't see. And then the most important, and this goes back to the first thing that I showed you guys with that flyer from CDC, be kind to your body. If you're in the bathroom, in your living room, in your bedroom, set things up so that it's for a good life, not for challenging. Well, there's always ways you can challenge yourself, do good exercise. But when it's for living your life, to do the things that are important to you, make the house and the environment work for you so that you don't put yourself at undue risk. Think about if you get the flu or if you come home really tired or if you have an urgency because either you eat something that makes you have urgency or you waited too long to get to the bathroom. You want everything working in your favor so that even in those imperfect circumstances when you're at your worst, you're still not going to fall. That's really the test for a good environment. And with that, I realize I am just a chatterbox. I want to share. I promised I would share some of these.
Wait a minute, Julie. Is it okay to put ankle weights on yourself and alternate it back and forth to get your balance straight?
Oh, yes. So if you're at home and you have a safe way and place that you can do this using your weights, I think is brilliant. You want to work out, you want to enjoy working your body out. And if you have questions, so Winnie, you're going to your PT, run it by your PT and say, these are the exercises I'm doing at home, in addition to the ones you give me, because I'm Winnie and I go the extra mile. And then she might have suggestions, which you can opt to take or not take, but run it by her, right? Get the full use of her. I love it. So I'm sharing.
I have a question,
Yes.
because it just went briefly by it very quickly. I'm starting back with physical therapy on my balance, and you just kind of briefed over it a little bit. I'm finding that the loss of part of my peripheral vision is really messing with me badly, and that by this time I'm months out from the stroke, and everything else I'm okay with except my balance. I can't, and I keep bumping into stuff. My whole right side of my body's got bruises on it because I won't see anything and I turn and slam right into it.
Yeah.
And I'm wanting to know, is this with physical therapy, are they aware of all of this, or is there some way that I can get some of the information that you posted up here and bring it to physical therapy and say, look, this is what I need to work on, because I'm still walking with a cane, not because I'm limping, but because I'm off balance, and I've been trying to walk without it, but I still find myself going from one side to another, or I'm not feeling steady. And again, like, I'm tired of, I mean, I like my purple hair, but I do not like my purple legs or my purple arms
Yeah.
from the bruises. And right now, winter, nobody sees it, but come spring and summer, I'm going to have all these like blotches up and down the side of my body where I'm turning into people. They're almost right on top of me, and I turn and there they are.
So my short answer is any licensed therapist should know of these things. However, it's always I always say we all need to take responsibility to vet anybody, even if we were told they were the best. So I would suggest, like, you could take the things that we talked about. Bruce is putting them up, so you'll have the recording of this talk. You'll have all of the CDC materials. You have the website link.
Okay.
You can either print those and bring them, or you can email them to your therapist, or have them where you open them and say, can I send these to you? But ask them to tell you what they know of and how these things might be part of your care. I think that's a really good thing, and it's a good way to start a conversation with your care team, in this case, your physical therapist for balance, and say, like, these are the things that I heard about. This one seems to be an issue. Can we talk about it?
Okay.
And bring that to the forefront. The other is your peripheral vision. As a few of us have talked about in this session, if there's prisms that might help get you a little bit of that peripheral vision back, a neuro-optometrist or neuro-ophthalmologist, if they have not already been identified on your team, I would ask about that, because maybe there's some of that vision.
I'm talking to my eye doctor more about that, and he was kind of surprised that I even knew anything about it, and he said that he could work with that. So that's something else coming up this spring that I'm going to be talking with him again about, because I've looked at, they can be pretty expensive. So to get those prisms, and I need to talk to my insurance to see if they're even going to cover anything like that.
Yeah.
If I could interrupt, I'm sorry, this is Bruce again. I think I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I thought having the prisms ground into my lenses were only about $15 a lens. They were not expensive at all. And
Well,
also, if you're talking,
yeah,
I've heard as much as 200.
Yeah.
So,
that's
so
not
Diane,
what
I guess to Bruce's good point, make sure, if your doctor was surprised that you brought it to him, is this something he really is expert in? Because whether it costs $15 or $200, if his expertise is just not there,
Right.
what you want to do is make it a good investment of however much it is. You'll find the way to do it if it works, but you
Right.
want someone who knows how to diagnose and assess it and give you the correct prisms. And so if there is different options in the system, and you can ask about that, and a neurologist would be a good place to
Yeah,
ask.
he might be able to refer me to someone. I'm in a limited area for that, but I'm in a very rural area. But up in Traverse City, there might be an ophthalmologist up there that would know that he could refer me to. So, but
Well,
it is
and sometimes rehab hospitals, if there's a rehab hospital you have access to, will have other providers that do the neurologic aspects of vision, because it's not your eye that's the problem. It's the
Isn't
brain
it called
tract.
like a
Yeah,
neuro-ophthalmologist?
Yeah, well, but also, someone was talking about loss of peripheral vision. Now, that can come with glaucoma or damage around the optic chiasm, or if you have a stroke that affects your right parietal lobe, you can lose your left field of vision.
I
So
love. Yeah, I
there could be a lot of things that could cause that.
Well, I had three different things that happened in the occipital lobe, and they identified where the blockage was. The thing that they showed me was completely inactive, and there's nothing wrong with my eye. It is the information from the occipital lobe going to my eye that was completely damaged, and it does not look repairable.
I'd find
So-
out from a neuro-ophthalmologist. I always say, make sure you have a problem before you worry about a problem. That would be in reference to the cost. And the other thing I would say is, if something would fix it for $200, I would think that would be life-changing. It wouldn't matter to me who paid for it.
Yeah,
That's my
there's
2
two
cents.
I know that there's two different ways that I can test this. One where you can get one to see if it's going to work right. There's one that I saw online where you can stick it on your glasses before you actually have your glasses ground, having a lens specifically made for that. And I'm going to be talking to him more about that come spring. I don't want to get into this. Right now we have no snow, but there's no guarantee, and I don't want him to say, okay, in 2 weeks we have you an appointment up in Traverse City, then we get 2 feet of snow and I can't get there. So I'm going to I'm kind of playing this out till springtime. Well, unless you've driven up here in 2 feet of snow, it's not snow. Each county plows differently. So
thank you for bringing that up, Diane. And yes, I think getting your eyes checked out, and I'd bring that to your therapist too, and say, who does neuro-opto stuff that you recommend? And the people in this group have great knowledge. I would use my network and say, who do you recommend? And I know there's different locations, but then hitting up the people in that field to say, who do you recommend, right? So maybe Bruce knows a good neuro-optometrist, but not near you, but maybe that person through their network of their expertise knows someone in the Traverse City area. But I would network like crazy to get my eyes the best that they could get, right? Really quickly, because I know we're beyond time. I'm so sorry to rush, but I have a meeting that I'm overdue for. I do want to quickly go through. These are some of the things you guys will have access to. Ralph is going to upload those for you, and they're available on that cdc.gov/STEADI website. Here's the checklist for safety. Has a really lovely thing for your stairs, your floors, your kitchen, your bedrooms, and your bathroom. So something that just let you go through and say, how do I make my environment work for me? Here's some nice little tips that are based on evidence and guidelines and people that do this for a living. Now I'm going to do, I don't know if I had to do that. Oh, am I talking over somebody?
No,
Did I lose you? Diane, were you saying something? Did I miss you?
No, I muted, I was talking to my husband. So
Got it. I
I
understand.
kind of muted because we were just kind of reiterating that we'd already spoken
Charlie.
to the eye doctor about all this stuff. And,
Very
what
good.
we need to
Got
do.
it. Okay. And then a few more that I'll go through because these are all uploaded or will be uploaded along with this talk. Here's a one that's just about what you can do to prevent falls. So it's just a really nice overview. And one, talk about proprioception, a way to train your proprioceptive system that none of us brought up today for whatever reason is Tai Chi, where you do these specific bends and angles in your hips and knees and ankles, and you hold that pose while you're mindful in your breathing. It's supposed to be a wonderful way to increase proprioception and gentle and kind.
same with yoga, even chair yoga.
Yeah, excellent. Here's a list to just know about medications and which ones have been tied to increasing your risks for balance. It doesn't mean that if you need them, you need them, but knowing that they're working against your balance and that it might be a reason alone to increase looking at what you can do to improve your balance in other fronts because of that is
I see
another
three
nice
things
one.
there that are issues for stroke survivors. Where to go? One was seizure medication,
Oh, yeah.
antidepressants. 30% of people are on antidepressants.
Muscle relaxants. Yeah.
20% or so probably have seizures and take anticonvulsants. And the other thing is some people have trouble sleeping, and those are generally sedatives.
This is not for you.
Not taking antidepressants.
Not for you.
And then the other one, this one, Abraham, this one's for you. This is also uploaded already, or will be from Ralph. But this is the Stay Independent brochure. And I love this because what this is you check yourself for your risk of falls. And so, and it even tells you, so you answer each of these questions. It's nice, one page. You answer yes or no. And you see you get a score for each yes. Some of them are worth 1 point, some worth 2. No's all give you 0 points. Obviously, you want less points here. And then why each one of these questions matters. Like, why did they ask me this question? You know, how so often we wonder, why did somebody ask me this? This one, they tell you question by question why they asked. And at the bottom,
Not for
you
you.
total. And it tells you that if you score 4 more points, that there is some risk for falls that warrants following up on. And to Diane, to your good question, if you're just starting with your therapist, what a wonderful thing to bring and hand to your therapist and said, I self-assessed my balance. And here's what I found using the CDC STEADI materials. What a great way to open that conversation.
You always
Yes.
need to make issues of the things that are important to you with your therapist because they aren't mind readers.
Right. It has to be the things that matter to you, and they can't know everything that that you're feeling. So letting them know.
Especially if they haven't met you before.
Yeah. I am so thankful to be part of this group. I hope this was helpful, and I'm available if you guys have questions. Ralph always knows how to get a hold of me. I do want to do a quick shameless plug. There's a mindfulness study we are still recruiting for. It's a series of a few weeks of sessions that you do on your own. It's an online learning platform. It's called Linger Meditation. It's quite gentle and lovely. It's really just about reflecting on the moment you're in with specific exercises. And at the end, you're asked to give a little feedback on the format as well as the material. But I'm hoping some of you might be interested. Those materials are up, and Ralph, were you going to post those again?
Yeah, I was going to ask, but you answered the question before I had to ask it. Because I'm happy to promote it. I'll mention it again. I've already written the copy. She shares her info with us. Let's return the favor. I got the graphics. Unless anything's changed, I'm good to go to post it. I did want to say, two or three little simple things. One of the things I did to get my balance back, this was way before I knew anything about anything, was I just found a corner. And I stood in the corner and I tried to come away from it, knowing full well that I could reach out with my hands or lean back into the corner. It's very simple. This was before I discovered suction grab bars and 42-inch counters. I think they're a much better way of doing it than the corner, and they're safer. So you just practice like letting go. In the very beginning, all you just want to do is stand there. I also did like mountain pose in yoga, which is basically what I called neutral. I paid attention to how far apart my feet were, that my knees weren't hyperextended, that my hips were in line, that my hips weren't going forwards or backwards. I just practiced a complete neutral position and would stand there in a good position. Posture is very important to balance as well, I think, because if you're hunched over, you got to get used to that posture. And as your posture changes, you have to change your balance. So why not get your posture right as you work on your balance? And the other thing is, once I found the grab bars, I would just stand there. And you can also do weight shifting. And once you get good at weight shifting, you start lifting the opposite foot up. You can do it more radically. And then the final thing I did was I stood on my affected leg and let go. You can also do this as a counter. Like the first thing you do is touch, then you try and like light touch, and then you don't touch, but you can touch the counter whenever you need to. And then you try and, the biggest one is when you take your hands away and try and put them down by your side, because it's a long way back to the counter and your brain just starts freaking out, even though nothing's happening. Our brains are one of the things that really hold us back a lot. Fear, not so much our brains, but the aspect of fear plays a large role in slowing down stroke recovery, in my opinion, because we're reluctant to do things when our brain's saying, Ralph, don't do that. Ralph, don't do that. Ralph, don't do that. And so simple things that I did, and I actually do them. I still do them because my balance could always get better. I do them at a lot of weird times, like how about like when I'm pumping gas? 2 minutes wasted. You can practice your balance. You can turn around and do the finger thing on the car. I do it in the kitchen when my dinner's going around in the microwave every night. You know, there's a lot of opportunities out there to do therapy where you're just standing around wasting time. So you could always think about that. Okay, I shut up now because we need to wrap this up, actually. Julie, you have anything else, or Dr. Schwertfeger, I should say?
Julie's fine.
So it's just so much easier to call you Julie and Bruce.
Julie works for me. Yeah, no, that works. I'm delighted to meet you all. I hope some of this was helpful to everyone, and I wish you all a wonderful day and good balance.
Well, thank
It
you.
was very helpful, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting, and thank everybody for coming. We got over 20 people today, so balance is a big deal for all of us. So thank you.